A-I-D-A. A, attention. Do I have your attention? I, interest. I know that you are interested. D, decision. Have you made your decision for Christ? Action, honest. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see, sings one gospel hymn. While another says that amazing grace shall always be my song of praise, for it was grace that brought my liberty. I do not know just why he came to love me so. He looked beyond my faults and saw my needs. And in previous videos on the topic of the healing of the blind man, we have delved into particular aspects of the account in the Synoptic Gospel of Mark in comparison with the Johannine account, where we find some intriguing aspects in the details to describe the man's blindness and healing, and narrative elements with revealing operational, shall we say, tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs. But for the next few moments, we shall depart slightly to focus upon the man being healed from his blindness to another type of blindness that features most prominently, particularly in the account that is recorded in the Synoptic Gospel of Mark, that blindness that had afflicted Jesus' own disciples, which stands in stark contrast to other blindness that is most prominent in the Johannine account, for the blindness of those who said they could see, often described as the Pharisees. And we can bookmark this lesson under the general topic of Christian leadership and Christian discipleship. And here, truly indeed, there is a pun intended. Some people have a natural fear of darkness, just as some people possess a natural fear of spiders. Some have fear of heights, and some have fear of flying, which the medical community, some have fear of the number 13, which the medical community and the discipline of psychology most often may describe as phobias, which are technically defined as an extreme or irrational apprehension or aversion to something, and to which practically nobody is totally immune, especially when there is an element of ambiguity or uncertainty. It is said that Khalid Mohammed, the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, actually endured being waterboarded 183 times without folding. Perhaps because he realized that waterboarding may give you the sensation of simulated drowning and suffocation, but it's actually not likely to kill you. It could, but it's not likely. And it was his knowledge and strong discipline that helped him to get through even waterboarding, which may have freaked most people out. Men are, although endowed with the capacity of reason, far more emotional than they would like to believe. And any psychologist worth his paycheck could tell you that your most vulnerable moments are those weaknesses to which you willfully or even subconsciously blind yourself. But one of the most fascinating aspects of the tale about the carpenter, or some biblical scholars have suggested was more likely actually a stonemason in Galilee, was that 4 of the 12, or 1/4 of his disciples, were by profession fishermen who were called to become fishers of men, which should have vested that leadership team with a good cadre of institutional knowledge about the dangers associated with the water. But the Gospels appear to suggest that not even This experienced leadership element in their discipleship made them immune to dangers and fears when sailing upon the waters. And in both the Johannine Gospel as well as the Synoptic Gospel of Matthew, we find the master and teacher Jesus relying upon this organic leadership team possessed with seamanship mastery to take charge, sending them out ahead of him on a boat by themselves. Fishermen who could not yet foresee a tempest coming and perhaps just blindly following orders. But that knowledge of the dangers of the seas certainly comes back to Peter, who had left the other three fishermen behind when Jesus asked him to answer his call to come out to him upon the waters. Suddenly he remembered, I cannot walk on water. I could die. Takeaway lesson, blindly following orders can be a little bit dangerous. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. Crisis presents danger and opportunity. And in the Synoptic Gospel, we find our fishermen leadership cadre failing yet again when there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves. But finding the master asleep, causing the disciples to include as many as 4 experienced fishermen, awakening their master and teacher, who's not a fisherman. He's at most a carpenter or a stonemason to save them. So that is just the first leadership team failure we find, because after he had been awakened and had rebuked the winds and the sea, and after there was a great calm, his disciples, which included, again, 4 fishermen, including Peter, the fishermen who had dared to come out to Jesus upon the raging waters, all were recorded by Matthew as saying, what manner of man is this, that even the winds and sea obey him? What manner of this is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? Did they not know before awakening Jesus that he was truly the Lord? Just as the blind man in the Johannine account comes to know and worship, even after losing his own family, being rebuked by the synagogue and cast into exile from his own town. What manner of man is this? Jesus probably sat there and looked at the disciples and said, I don't know, Jesus? And this sets the stage for the account that is recorded in the Synoptic Gospel of Mark, the only gospel that may be described as a first-hand eyewitness account from a disciple of Jesus, with the others, for those engaged in the legal profession, being denominated as at most hearsay, being presented by those who could not, as we say, testify as an eyewitness to the fact of the matter in court. Just as the blind man in the Johannine account was able to testify to the townspeople and to the Pharisees based upon his personal witness, giving him his strength. And that puts us in this boat in the Synoptic Gospel of Mark before encountering the blind man. The chapter opens with the miracle feeding of the 4,000 that's found the disciples asking, where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them? Apparently, the disciples did not have the faith in him as many today have in the vaccine, in non-medical grade facial coverings, in the pronouncement from Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky in public health guidance, because they believed they had to question Jesus when he told them what to do and what would occur. Can I get an amen? And before getting aboard the boat, even the Pharisees in this account recorded by Mark arrived to pose questions to Jesus and to test him, demanding some sign from heaven, as if he required more credentials. Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. But he sighed deeply and said, why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given. Now, what exactly is he saying when he's saying that? What exactly is he saying when he's saying that? No sign will be given. Jesus is not going to give you a business card. He's not going to show you his degree. One of the things that we talked about when we examined New Testament in an introductory course in college was that he had his own authority, and that those who believed him did not believe him based on signs, but based upon faith. This also comes up in Søren Kierkegaard, Fear and Trembling, in terms of the faith that he had, not based upon a sign, but true faith. So Jesus was having what may be described in political science as a legitimacy problem, not trusted by Pharisees or even his own disciples as a leading authority to be followed. This is what management consultants might describe as a toxic leadership climate or environment. Pew Research Center found this back in 2019 when they looked at the trust that people have in the federal government. 73% not trusting the government to do the right thing. 66% not trusting others to do the right thing. A legitimacy problem. And so here we are with the disciples on the boat out on the sea, having departed, the miracle feeding of the 4,000. And we find yet another leadership team failure again, beginning at chapter 8, verse 14, where we find recorded these words: the disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. Like during the reading of an operations order, let's review this statement of the situation again before getting into the mission. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them already in the boat. They had fed 4,000. They had managed with the assistance of 4 presumptively able fishermen, and they had yet failed to make their provision for the hereafter. Can you relate to this here situation? Have you been to this place before? Does any of this sound familiar? Can you testify to the church from your own experience? Does anybody know my Jesus? I say, does anybody know my Lord? Now turn to your neighbor and say, the preacher's kid is talking to me. Now, in a former life, I had the distinct honor and privilege to have served as what is referred to in the military as an aide-de-camp to a commander of a major command, or MACOM, echelon above corps level strategic counterintelligence activity. And my boss had subordinate leaders that included battalion commanders in at least the rank of lieutenant colonel or 05. He had one intelligence activity commander in the rank of full colonel, 06, and he had a GS-15. And with far more frequency than one without experience could possibly imagine, I recall very well many a late afternoon getting on the phone to give them a call for a meeting in the command suite because the boss wanted to see them in the boardroom for a little discussion that always began with the words, "This does not look like a success story." The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. I witnessed this scene so many times that I became intimately familiar with the distinctive pattern that these meetings always tended to follow. These were all, I was on the trail, like drill sergeants in basic training, dealing with privates, doing things that you just could not imagine. These were all persons of adult age who all possessed college degrees, years of experience and training, and could fill your ear with a recitation of their many great and wonderful accomplishments. But on those afternoons, I would see pouting faces, fingers pointing, and full-grown adults who were, as Barbara Streisand says in the movie Funny Girl, acting more like children than children. But invariably, encountering the evolutionary pressure of recognition that they could not escape without resolving upon some solution to bring to the boss, someone would always step forward like a Peter with a bit of obeisance, a bit of sycophancy, and a bit of apology to stand up to the boss, coming forward to say, "You know, sir, I know this looks pretty bad, I have to admit myself, but, you know, I can explain all of this." And that was always the most interesting parts of those meetings. But Jesus did not go there with the disciples on the boat. Not even with the experienced and able fishermen who should have known better than most to bring bread. And beginning at verse 15, we find, be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. I want you to think about that. Giving them an opportunity to kind of chew on this morsel and review their situation. And it is recorded that they discussed this with one another and said, it is because we have no bread. Okay, genius. And aware of their discussions. Aware of their discussions. Do you feel me? Jesus asked them, why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see, and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? And these are the disciples, the men called by Jesus, who we encounter yet again in Mark chapter 8, verses 27 to 30, where we find recorded from a first-hand account, Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, who do people say I am? Conducting a kind of Gallup poll in Galilee. And they replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. What is going on here? It's test time, face time with the boss. At the very beginning of the chapter, we don't find the Pharisees saying anything quite as flattering. We don't find Jesus even believing that the men who brought the blind man to him to be healed believed anything wonderful had come from Nazareth. And now his disciples are in his face saying, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets. So we find 12 disciples who may not be acting entirely forthcoming with Jesus. And what does he do? He turns that situation around as he asked at verse 29, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And there was a silence amongst the 12. But the one who was willing to follow orders and jump out from a boat on a raging sea does come forward to say, you are the Messiah. And many a sermon blows this moment up as a great, wonderful moment for Peter and the revelation of the true nature of man who has been called Jesus, the Savior and Lord. But how does he respond in this wonderful moment for Peter? Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about it. Now let's just say, were I Jesus, having been with these disciples through the account in chapter 8 in the Synoptic Gospel of Mark, I would not want them on the street as my salesman yet either. As drill sergeants are wont to say in basic training to privates, you ain't graduated yet. And Jesus said, for judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words. And Jesus said unto the Pharisees, the woke and the enlightened ones, if ye were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say we see. Therefore your sin remaineth. This briefing is unclassified. Till next time, you have a right to remain silent, as you were. My name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for U.S. Congress. Next year, make the right choice, and we shall make America great again. Honest. Y'all come back now, yeah? Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb. And y'all come back now. Here.